This is an introduction, writings from the Oxford Anthology of Writings from Northeast India, fiction. First of all, let's talk about the introduction of to Northeast India, okay? So in Northeast India, often referred to as the Seven Sisters, such as Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, Kanshaveka. And then these regions are well known for their ethnic, linguistic, and cultural diversity, okay? So historically, they are marginalized and they are also geographically isolated. So we'll look deeper into that. So looking into the historical and political context, we see colonial legacies and partition trauma. Northeast kan enring chuan hey colonial legacies kan mu British ho nu ma kan tiang chi mo an omlai an influence de chu literature engting ya alo lan chwati thi kan zir don ani chuan partition trauma te ke for example a big takin Assam state big mo khatiang te kan enanga chuan a Tripura mo po chuan refugee influx Tripura bika ni nani chu omna sa he Bengali migrants ka atam antam tani heng hian Bengali he demographic anmani landante and demographic change kan sa takin lo thlentirani. For example, Tripura ho ka chu hill area lama an tamzoka Bengali immigrants ho ka plain lama khanan tamjok chon chu an culture a effect chu literature apo kan hubok ani. Then we also see themes of insurgency, ethnic tensions, and border conflicts. For example, in Mizoram, insurgency, right? In Meghalaya and all in Naga also, we see so many counter-insurgency. We also see ethnic tensions like communal conflicts. This hemi big he unit danga kanzirang chi te poka hemi inzia huna khani no draw lut the ani. For example, poem kanzira te khan Sundori ti te mo khang te poka communal conflict awanga chian te relationship te friendship te ti chian na sajia te khatiang kan mo ani mo he border awanga boy na te Mizoram ringot po he border awang hen kan boy nem to ni khang chi te chuan kal kheng zong hen he cultural balance te po ati boy na sa ani tekin Tripura nga hen he tangi atam Bengal ho pemlu tamlu ata Tripura ho connect chep an ni zel ani an hey population ka in terms of population akan atlem zo kan nizel boxia. So let's dive deep into the Northeast literature. Northeast chuan one of dominant feature, okay? One main feature of the Northeast literature is that they are very rich in oral traditions and folklore, okay? So kanazirla unit laza po khan when the river sleeps akan, we see so many folklores myths, okay? Hey folklores the myths the khatyang ti atam ani kan house Mizo po ni se Naga po ni se hityang he states danga po education the Christian missionaries the khatyang an lo lu ma khan oral tradition vegani all the knowledge of the stories we are passed down from generation to generation through oral storytelling mo ka in shil chon khatyang atang ve kathil tam tak thon thu te poni se kan shriat ve kaditani chu kan alang bok tani. And then multilingual and multicultural expressions ama he culture dangte na kading chiap pia ma chuan chong kam pakhat he kan local dialect kan native dialect kha kan mang mai thin ta ni ma se khami nu ku chon for example tuna po Mizoram ringa ta po Mizo chong cho kan mang to lo tiru he English te po influence kan mu to ni chuwang chuan Hindi te kan no thiam bel boka language pakhat atang khan bilingual ate multilingual te kan chho to ni chuan culture pakhat chau kha tolo di mana Mizo traditional dress te kantia bidang ne na kanin pol ma chuan dress chi khatte kan nei ta ni bidang culture dang local atu na chun phei ta po puan bi chu soilo ke korte kan hato ami pa te potro tiang zel khan kanin thak zel ani chuan literature mang hian violence le displacement tam tak kan torte for example Mizo a chuaning ye khokhom kan ti te mo chuan insurgency ti te namdang apon is a militant movement mo he underground le sipai indo ti de khatyang vela wanga violence theme te kan hunne ma chuan khamia wanga culture identity loss te mo culture loss te displacement khami kan tor tam tak te po kha kan mutani kha literature mang khan khatyang trauma response te he khatyang ri runat ne te poni se be say na thar te poni se through literature they try to find its expression. Okay, they try to express their grief, their trauma and hopes through literature chuan. So most of the literature has of the Nordic literature has themes of identity loss there, identity crisis, the violence, the resistance, the peace, the khatyang te kan mudon ni chuan. So one of the recurrent themes of the Nordic literature will be cultural loss le recovery kha ani don ni chuan. Culture invasion le clash of cultures the meng culture invasion kan ti chun culture dang ina keimani culture allo in class kan allo lu khan what happened, what are its effects more. Cultural invasion chi sang sang he Nordic be ka umta he bhakti movement kan di te colonialism chu British presence of English people more chuan Christian missionaries movement te Christian missionaries so in enge kan chunga kan nam mo enge an inting an low in rola kha inting kan literature thlengin an thak ti te po kan mutani chuan. With the invasion of new culture we see new ideas invading the region. Okay, culture dang an lo lu reng chuan ideas thar kan nei ta ni thil ngai dan thar te ngai to na thar. For example, man lai chuan Mizo society a chuan zol book kan nei thin kha in nge replace kan ti chuan school system kan ti khana lo replace da ne kan che thiam te ro kha tiang che kha e thil che sang practice che sang kha alo om ta ni mana superstitious belief kan nei te e practice kan nei thin he chu a thalo he chu a primitive he chu a savage ti te he chu swalan di kan ti te. For example, zoo in ho te mo kha tiang in ti hlimna kan nei te po kha thil thar khana lo thak zel ta ni. And then as a result of culture invasion, another changes that come is loss of cultural forms and adoption of new culture icons at siang mai tiro kan traditional forms tam taka kan lo ta and then not only that it result in the adoption of new culture icons til ngai san tharte ingen yang da chung nun tharte khatyang te kan nei chhota ani. And then see I relate lo mai thia ma se kan shia thiam dan tur chuan hey culture dang a local khan kan society thil practice tam tak te hi athak ve and here ko shanang me lo example lo mang ta la hey khwang nia la sakhi kan thiam em ta kan society a chon ma se worship song ti te po he tiang te po change si khat mai ni khat ve thoni hemi literature la ma chuan ha in tu ha lo mai te kan shia thiam dan tur engtin nge culture thar ina keimani culture alo thak dan engtin nge culture new icon new ideas kan nei dan mo khatyang chi te writing form a poni se man lai chon hey folklore changin kan point te ideas kan nei kan zia lampang po he engen yang lal chi te lal chungkwa te le nam chon kan ti te hei nyang I noi nung kan ti te inkara in mangai lo piang te poni the a pasal tha chan chin te ni thina ni chuan tuna chuan hei modern themes chi sang a local to ni chu hei urban themes te po alo lu to ni khatyang ngor khani to lo literature ringo ta pon alo in thak na se em ta ni so I think you'll get the idea. And then so culture negotiations te khami hemi class alo om cha khan khami lai hol te middle te mo khami ina culture thar te mo new culture te mo change lo thlen te chuan khami forms of resistance khami resist tuma khami thil tam tak resist tuma ke mani nam thil te preserve kan tum sham te khatyang chi te engting nge khatyang te kha kan recover le he kan nam thil hi achhalowan tia achhalo poni leinem achhalowa kan ngai wanga lom tia thil tam tak kan recover le te kan chom nun that le te khatyang tam tak te lo om ve thei ta mi mum. So Khanka under the culture invasion and clash of cultures. And then what other changes do we see from culture invasion? We see literary transformations, right? We have talked about this. And then we see new ideas invading the region. We see loss of traditional forms. Kan tradition form ka kan lo zel tani oral tradition te written in a lo thak te ro ka athil kan in shil chon chin te khatuna chuan aziakin chuan adoption of new culture icons kan soi to challenges to traditional forms hemi new culture lo omreng reng khan it challenges our traditional forms, okay? And so and then we also see attempts to critique and review one's own society. New culture new icon more culture invasion omreng rengin our own society ka critique te en chian te zir chian te mo ngai tua that te kha khatiang idea khatiang te kha kan ti thina ti chuan he kan en che chi ni chuan thil tam ta kha he kan thak chin reng bok ta ni. So in Nordic literature another important point to know is the influence or the contribution of Christian missionaries. Okay, Christian missionary yan kan literature and contribution tam tak an mani pon kan society as a whole, kan religion as a whole kan nasatakin change kan lo thlen ve bok ani. With the coming of Christian missionaries, one positive change we see is establishment of printing presses. Okay, printing presses kan lo keng ani education thiam na zir na aob mo khateng te min siam saka chuan printing presses thil print na to written form kha mai pialama khami kan print na tur mo khateng kha printing presses an lo ken chuan nge nyang print culture kan lo nei ngal ta tro. And then what do they do next? They translate religious texts, okay, such as Bible kha and translated in not only that other texts, okay, chuan secular line nga hey zir na thil te khateng tam tak kha book te thon thu te ma translation kha omsa kha an mani omsa khan lo translate ta chuan khami nu a kha chuan ke mani culture atanga thil tam tak kha zia te kha alo om chho to ta ni mo chuwang chuan khami kha Christian missionaries a inan lo ken kha ni ta ni ti chuan not only that, okay, and many local rural can what happened is we see bilingual practice more hey sap chong kha kan lo zir chan to ta ni chu in many of the hill states English is often is also used its official language. Official manawang kan sap chong kha ke mani nuna khan ke mani society a khan atlan em tani post independence writers page so they increasingly write in English, okay? And there will be many reasons why the modern writers chose to write in English. First, English is the official language in many hill states, okay? And then it is also used as medium of education. And then writers chose to write in English in order to reach wider audience and recognition, okay? And then they also find it easier to express themselves better in English also. And then now we'll look into each states, okay? State kan en nga tlang poi an mani engtinge om ti te khateng te kha kan en logang Tripura. Let's look into Tripura state, okay? We see Bengali cultural dominance. Tripura chu kan share tur chu they share a very close proximity with the Bengals, okay? Bengal ho ne na ani nai em awang hian Tripura chuan close proximity to Bengal nei wang hian they that influenced their culture history, okay? And that also led to demographic change. Omse chu ama Tripura state Tripura tam khai Bengal kha migrant khan lo tam zela wangin anram tam ta khan lo lua ve ta ni kan sia thiam nan chuan kan chenom rama boya wangin kan rama po district tam tak chu mo immigrants ho khan hey refugee te po khan mun tam tak ten lo lua ve ta ni khanga chu he Bengal he mi Tripura case in the compare chuan ate tham mai the ma se khang ina kan society te engtin ye a change ve what kind of change do they bring a cha nge a cha po ni se change ka chu lo thlen nge ni khang kan culture history kha a thak bok ani, okay? Chuan migration and identity crisis of indigenous communities. Tripura bika chuan the indigenous communities in Tripura how khan me khan identity crisis the migration te an nei ta ni kha kan poetry zira khan point pakhat o por ha chukrai ti khamo khami point ta kha en ula ram po khan nei mang to lo ni nga tinge gan ti chuan hill area om te chu engtin nge an zone train lo te kan siama tiro chuan plain area te ram tam zo kha Bengali migrants hoina an lo lo zel awang khan anei zona turte po na satakine effect ta ni chu khami awang khan na satakin harsana tam takte an tok ta ni khangte kha written a khan writing a khan lo lang ta ni literature a khan. For example, Tripura are Bengali writers ho chuan they write about struggles with diasporic identity, okay? And then the Tripura writers will be writing about the identity crisis lost of their culture, okay? And then after the rise of tribal militancy in Tripura, we see the rise of Kokboro language. So in Tripura, Kokborok has gained official language status after the rise of tribal militancy and identity movements, okay? So modern Kokborok literature is growing with confidence and deeply rooted in the lived experience of tribal communities, and it challenges stereotypes about mainstream versus peripheral cultures, we can say that. So in Tripura, not only that, what kind of struggles do the indigenous communities have? They see the massive influx of Bengali refugees from East Bengal. It drastically alters Tripura's demographic structure, okay? Tripura population struggle, demographic structure here. Kami East Bengal changa in son thlapem thanasal duka athagna se em tani. Bengali speaking population kanga itola 70%. Top honey chuan they marginalize the indigenous communities, and it also triggers ethnic tensions and identity-based movements and among tribal groups, okay? Khatiang khopa aram nei tu te anek chep chuan engtinia khang kan ethnic tension a chhualawang khang te kha writers ha khana lo lang na se em ta nei ti chuan ziak mi ten khatiang thil lampang ten lo out chhuwa puya I khang te khan engene identity-based movement te militant movement te alo thleng ta ni. After the rise of tribal militants in nu kha chuan Kokboro language kha anmani he Tripura Trong khamo khami kha Bengal Trong man mantrin kha official apon mantrin kha Kokboro khanan thak ta ni sumon. Chuan Manipura kalle ila Manipura hi chuan what distinguishes Manipur from the rest of the hill states is that the other northern states is that Manipuri literature lacks the influence of missionaries, okay? Missionary translation there, missionary influence in Manipura chuan this state dang ang khana tamlo ta ni hinga condition because of Vaisnava culture, which is strongly patronized by the Manipuri royal dynasty, okay? Khang lai Manipuri royal dynasty ti khan Vaisnava culture ti kha an patronized tani so chung chuan enge result ti chuan it results in the domination of the cultural and literary space. Khami culture khan Vaisnava culture kha an cultural and literary space zong kha alwa ne em awangin hey hian it what happened after that it results in little room for missionary efforts, okay? Missionary influence do kam huna kian vak tholo thani Manipura chuan chuwang chuan ya Hindu religion te mo khatyang Vaisnava culture awang khan Christian influence kha ana savak theilo tani chumok hang kha kan muta a. And then what kind of themes do we see in the Manipur literature is that we see dominant theme of human rights violations and loss of traditional life, okay? After post 1970s, Manipuri fiction dealt a lot with themes like the destruction of traditional ways of life, the effects of modernization, and particularly the widespread human rights violation, which is caused by Manipura chang underground movement te tam em ta insurgent le counter-insurgent violence, okay? So the stories reflect the psychological as well as the social scars borne by the people of the region, okay? So after the departure of the British, the Manipuri poets, writers respond to that. And the emergence of militant movements which shift from romanticism to anti-romantic modernism. See, militant movement te kan muna sa tani hey himo parasu pators well te kha rachwak le ro khanga khan militant movement te na mi nun thalai nun te ati boizia kha underground movement khamo khami kha engtiang na sa in nge annun kha achok boy mo khami wang in ocean life te an society peaceful harmonious existence coexistence eng na sign ya ati chiat mo khangte pokhari ruwa lo lang le se. And then we also see socio-political trauma, okay, and the inner turmoil of a society grappling with violence and loss of identity, okay. So we see disillusionment, we see militant movements, how it has effect and how it has found its reflection in its literature. All right. Now let's go to Assam. We see in Assam, we see effects of ethnic violence and political unrest, okay. Assam boy border boy pale to. So we also see diasporic Bengali and identity struggles, okay. And then we see writers exploring themes of migration, identity, and peace. Now let's go to the next slide. So in modern Assamese is often regarded as the philologist paradise. Ingeting modern Assamese language, philologist paradise ngai ani hehimo poi molutuk. We see because we see in modern Assamese we see heterogeneous elements of various languages. Assam chunga language strong element tel komang klukhani tani. So this might come in MCQ and 3 marks question answers also. And then Assamese language is also considered as the lingua franca for neighboring hills, okay. Nagaland Mizoram de poni sentan chuan anin biak po na pakhat poi mo de khani tani. And then so Assamese language ka standardized ni tani kami nu khan enge kan mu ni chuan Assamese language ka standardized ni nu khan we see marginalized of other spoken language dang kha marginalized sir nol mo sir nol te myang kami kha anni tani chu. And then it polyglot culture po ha kan mu bok ni chu. See atira phe chuan British colonizers ho khan Bengali khan Assam khan he Bengali ho hi chu India anga Tripura te Assam te na close bound border mo khatiang India khan ni tani chu wang chuan khatiang presence sang de ka ombe tani chu. So British are trying to impose standardized Bengali for administrative convenience, okay. An mani ro rel na a pui theinan khan Bengali ka standardized an tum tani chu khangkha it received resistance from Assamese literati and that is also supported by the American Baptist missionaries, okay. Tu ten nge kami Bengali ka standardized an tuma lodo pui tu chu American Baptist missionaries ho khani tani ti chon Assamese literati mo khang ho to po khan tran an lave bok tani. Chuan Nagaland hi en le ila we also see Christian influences in Nagaland apo achiang reng chuwang chuan northeast tamzo ka hian we see the influence of Christian missionaries, okay. Chuan Nagaland apo khan moral religious themes ka kan hmu na sa ni omzia chu Christian influence no khan he oral tradition thin kha written a lo thak no khan because of the Christian influence, okay. We see moral and religious themes from the Bible. Hey Bible atang unlock moral te injirtir na mo zirtir nei thon thu te chuan sa khwana kai noi khatiang theme nei ziak te khating te ka lo om ni satani ti chuan not only that insurgency of angan displacement le psychological confusion khatyang te po alang ve na sa chuan modern Naga literature chuan he ta tuna moral le religious themes lampang te mo khatyang om thin kha politics te urban struggle te khatyang te kha lo lang chho to ta ni chu. That means, see, in modern Naga literature, which of course is often written in English, see Naga te Khasi te Meghalaya poni se English is te see bilingual te multilingual te nijina kan so effect khatyang kha atam trinta ni chu. So they have moved beyond religious themes, okay. And now in modern literature, Nagaland literature, we see writers exploring themes of political violence like urban struggle and personal trauma, okay. So these were all influenced by real life conflicts and curfews. So we see this in the works of many writers, okay, like history nang chite temsula out yang chite pokhani se they reflect revolutionary zeal and disillusionment khatyang chite kha until lang na sa tani. But at the same time the writers are also trying to preserve traditional oral storytelling, okay, and they try to blend it into contemporary genres. So that also gives their literature a unique voice, okay. Chuan speaking of Christian influences, in Nagaland, missionaries introduced the Roman script to various Naga language, okay? Our Nagas trangkan 19th century vela khan. So missionary na train na so Christian text the khan translate na sa a big takin gospels lampang demo. And then hemi wangring hinya an early literature ka moral and religious themes de katyang ton ka nga chuan insurgency ti te mo hemi war tam tak the culture transformation ka athlentir na sa ni Indian government tele Naga underground te khatyang vel in karvela chhuakang che khani tani hemi indo na hemi conflict te hemi war te hian it led to the disruption of traditional rural life and values, and we also see displacement of people, and then they shift toward materialism and urban migration, okay? And then the youth were uprooted from peaceful village life, and they face confusion, and they also face alienation. So all these experiences reshape their literature and thus infuse it with themes of violence. We see identity loss, the disillusionment, the khatyang themes, the alan paring boktani chu. Then coming to Mizoram, insurgency kan huboka tiro Mizoram khan inge Mizo subject apo kan zir zia kan ti chuan village regrouping kan ti te khom kan ti te tun thleng in he Indian sipai na aizol an bomb te he an bomb champha alo thlen te hian do not forget more, let's remember ti te po khatyang te kan mu fo thin he khatyang te kan mu ani chuan inge kan laknat as a society anga collective trauma kan carry chuinge kan ti chuan khami sipai te na kan mei chhia te chunga an chet du da dan te mo kan sipai te an tha te tun thlenga party na hei kan ramzalen na sual tu party khatyang vel te po kan share thini heng zong zong hi insurgency khatyang te po zia ka khan literature khan alo langta ni chumon chuan Christian influence kan mubok ta ni missionary khan enge kha Roman script kha min siam sakta ni dulian hei lusei dialect atan hian min siam sakta ni chu chuan Christian influence kha changa Christian influence chuan religious text te kan translate chhota ni khating chi te mo chuan pakhada chung Christian influence khami khan enge lo thlen kan ti chuan marginalization of oral traditions, education lo lu ro khan he chu ainang vek oral traditions ka ari a marginalized chintani not totally replace top chu kan ti thelo ma se sira khana nol ve deu hlek tani chu chuan village regrouping te kan mu cheni. So what is the effect of village regrouping kan ti chuan we see erosion of social institutions and traditional life. Village regrouping kokom kai ngan ti chanber kan ti te po kan shiat kha khami khan mun sang mi ka mun khata anda chon sipai ho khan anmani vonte anmani chunga ro rel kha ati all samtani chu chuan social institution tam taka ati chetani chu untraditional life unpracticed thei thin te poka engma kha anti thei to lo tani chu mom khatyang te kha kan hmutani chuan. So insurgency brought violence and social trauma, and then this led to the emergence of a subversive form of literature that reflect the suffering and resistance of the Mizo people, okay? And then literature also give voice to the anguish caused by militarization and social upheaval during the counter-insurgency phase, okay? Kangka anriru natnete khatyang aning lo zong ka militarization noyamo khatyang khachung boy nate inka nate tha nate in tha khatyang zong ka literature khan kan ziak chuak china khangkha literature mang khan and voice and all te kha an chua theita ni mo khatyang te po Mizoram literature khan kan mu theita ni chuan a contemporary literature a phechon Mizo chongchong ni tolo he bilingual te mo chuan a themes te poka adang chhota ni chuan Khasi Kalila missionaries influence kan mu bok ani chuan Khasi script te hey Nigel Jenkins page 1 Khasi writers lack confidence to write in Khasi titani mo, and one reason for that is because the education system promotes writing in English. An education system can English as ya ka promote tata chuwang chuan an local dialect ka an engenyang sira nolve tani chumo local dialect ka an mang du talo tani chu engi mo chena chuan local dialect zia kha a har po anti pha theita ni chuan khata kha Nigel Jenkins chuan he hopes that the Khasi writers will one day choose to write in Khasi mo an mani chonge na kina chuan an la zia le ngam kha ringa khangte kha amoya te an poetry te po an mani chonge khan ziak se adu ta ni chumo chuan hemi thua hian Salman Rushdie ne hian ngai dan khai dang lo tani Salman Rushdie of course supports writing in English because he sees it as a powerful global medium, okay, and kami kha English zia kha inge support vak lo tu te kha an views kha he a narrow minded a parochiality ni khatyang khamo a chul heinem English te chu international language nia hetianga kan zia hian medium chatak min pe a khatyang te kha ti veni ti chuan Khasi script a hian enila atira chuan Khasi lake a native script, okay, so language like Assamese, Bengali, those were used for administrative purposes, but Bengali script pay to New Testament translate nante khatyang te kha print nante pon mangani mase we see the Welsh missionaries, okay, after the coming of the Welsh missionaries they introduced the Roman script which became standard for Khasi writing. So that's the influence of the Christian missionaries. And then not only that, we also see the colonial civilizing mission on Khasi literature, okay? The colonial civilizing mission led by Christian missionaries promote written religious literature and discourage the rich indigenous oral traditions of the Khasi people. That is why Nigel Jenkins is even speaking in support of the Khasi language, okay? So this promotion of written religious literature in English led to the marginalization of secular and traditional storytelling forms such as hymns, and the Bible stories dominated early Khasi written literature. Khangte po kha kan hu chobok ta ni chu khanga Khasi bi ka khandita se this one. Let's come to the common themes we see in the Northeast literature. We see identity preservation as well versus cultural assimilation. Culture hi kana culture hi an assimilate na sa tani hi chu kan chiang sa mai ta tero culture invasion na chang kan soi to kha. This one violence and its psychological aftermath, okay? Violence, insurgency te Indo-na war te communal conflict te border conflict te wanga violence tharum thona chi sang in thana chi sang ina psychological psycho mi ru ti boije te anamang zonga natnamo scar kan nei zia te khatyang chi te pokha kan mutani we see the writings. So the writings of the Nordics reflect their experience with violence, okay, from the partition to insurgent movements. So the writers of the Nordics try to portray themes of trauma, themes of social change, identity crisis, and human endurance. They also express both personal and collective struggles, which is very much shaped by marginalization and geographical isolation. And then we see community endurance and human relationships, and we see nature, the environment, the mythological symbolism. Temo hey hills people kan ni nang hian nature mo thing kung ti te khatyang ram how khatyang vel te kha kan preserve na em ta chuan hey engen yang environment degradation te khatyang kan laut na zia te khatyang chi te pokha kan hut he ani chu chuan oral literature le modern writing mo oral literature kan ti chuan aziak ni lo ka atanga kan in shil chon khatyang chi te mo oral literature le modern writing kan hu ta ni oral literature kha initially this is what we have, okay, and then later on replaced by written literature kha kan nei bok ta ni ti chuan we see blending of oral traditions with written forms. So wangchon oral tradition le written forms kha allow in blend Chantani sumo khangkha pakhadina pakhad lualan top lo khain tinge kan blend chop theng ti te khatyang te pokha om chhota di chuan oral le written mo khami englo te kha ain challenge chodan te kan mutani oral very rich in oral tradition kha tinge written khan azong zonga totally replaced lo e khami hierarchy boina te khatyang te pokan nei ave boktani chumo ti chuan mythology kan house ta Nordic big phe chu e kan shiat ve karinga so khamia ka chuan lut tam lo tamai ta ila chuan si himi hierarchy zoka claimin englo le lokang si oral literature hi kan tel to bok ta ni chumo himi hi to challenge traditional hierarchy between the written and oral forms. Okay, so tuna chuan it is now recognized as a valuable lens to understand cultural identity, history and social change. Himi oral literature khami changa ma na changa minlo kanin shil chon thin te ka ke mani identity te kan history te le social change nan mo shia thiam nan kan mang to ta ni chu. So that means modern writers ho hian traditional myths te mo khatyang te kha transform in keimani tun khovel kanton me contemporary concerns te mo changing social order te shia thiam nan te khan khatyang te kha anmang tangkai to ta ni chumo chuan language a big hian writers ho kha bilingual an ni ani lopon multilingual an ni thin mizo writer khan english a thiam phei chun chu mizo le english na ziak theya hindi thiam phei chuan tikhan language kha pakhat pen pani den ziak to ta ni ti chuan writing kha mother tongue te pon ziak ka regional language te pon ziak ka english te pon mo chuan cultural exchange te translation te nam dang zia but translate te keimani nam chonga kan zia English kan va translate le te khatyang te po kan hutani. So overall we can say the literature of Northeast is deeply rooted in its socio-political context. Okay, Northeast literature reng to kan social life te kan politics context akhan ain ngak thui em ta ni chumo chuan omje chu hey voices chi sang enge niang kan culture identity polo ni se kan politics awanga literature lowin soidang lam lutukte khangte po kan huta ni ti chuan we see voices navigating modernity which is tradition and conflict. Okay, so a vibrant and evolving literary landscape kha kan huta ni chuan northeast shim ka chuan mainland atang phei chuan enchanted space with mysterious traits ang deuh hle khan he engemaw nga min mu big na kha an nei ta ni and we see dominant theme of violence. Okay, due to what insurgency the human right violations the militant groups the kan mu le bok ta ni chumo. So we see the writers reflecting their experience with violence from the partition to the insurgent movement. So the writers will try to portray many themes of trauma, social change, identity crisis de khateng te pokha anjiang na sachin ta ni chu so itur chu atamanga khatyang kha atlang puini ta se kha tang khan idea kha kan nei thei mai ka ringa inchar zawila page by page mo chuan MCQ atan engting elo chuak thei ti te khateng te pokha kan envek don nia